Here we go.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome, everyone. Hey, it's episode
How's it going?
22 of Drummers Education Connection. I'm Rick Stojak. It's February 23rd, 2021, not 20. We got that one out of the way. I'm here with my brothers, Jeremy, Bart, and Chip. And Bart, we need a drum roll. Sam, it's a huge honor for us to welcome one of the greatest drummers in the world, one of the likablest guys ever, a leading educator, drummer, passionate guy on drumming, leading guy in the community, Joe Bergamini.
Yeah.
Joe
Welcome,
B.
Joe. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
It's a
What an honor.
pleasure to have you. A pleasure, Joe. Thank you for being on.
Thank you.
Oh, my God. Thank you, Joe. So Joe is a renowned drummer on Broadway. He tours internationally with his project called the D.E.C Project. He's recognized internationally as an educator and clinician. As an author, he's won 4 Modern Drummer Readers polls, including in 2013, a collaboration with Neil Peart, which we've got to talk about, a book, Taking Center Stage. Show us that. Oh, yeah. I'm sure there's a great story with that. Joe is also the designer and editor at Hudson Music. He's also the co-founder with our buddy Dom Famulero of the Wisdom Media, an independent music publisher. And Joe proudly endorses Tama, Sabian, Vic Firth, Evans, and Latin Percussion. And man, Joe, we really appreciate you being on. And, you know, our first question I have for you is, what is it about the drumming culture? You know, what makes it so special and different?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, again, thank you guys for having me. It's really an honor, and old friends and Chip, a new friend of mine. So I'm really happy to be here. So the drumming culture, I don't know. I think that I don't think it's just something people say when they call it a brotherhood or brother and sisterhood family. You know, I think we do have a connection. You know, I mean, one thing that Dom always told me to do. Dom was my teacher, you know, when I was in my early 20s, my mentor, you know, and he had me going to the NAMM show and PASIC from a very young age. And, you know, now when I go to PASIC, Percussive Arts Society convention, for those who don't know, it feels like a family reunion, you know,
Yeah.
and I just think that us drummers really do help each other out, and we have a camaraderie that's special. And you know, like I said, I'm sure that some other instruments have societies, but all my bandmates, you know, they're like, that drum thing, you know, you guys have clinics and all this stuff that you do, and we, you know, we don't do that, you know. So I think we just, for whatever reason, we have just a special bond. I don't know if it's the primal nature of playing drums or whatever it is, but you know, I have to say that you know, people have this impression that the drummer's the wild man or a wild person. But in my bands and most of my students' bands, the drummer's the one organizing things, booking the gigs, doing the promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like we're totally not that stereotype. We're the you know, at least my drummer friends and people I know are, you know, good business people, and they're organized. And so, yeah.
Yeah,
Gotta be smart to play the drums.
non-competitive cooperative spirit is
drummers-
really bonds us all together.
Yep, drummers are usually the ones that'll show a drummer another thing. Hey, how'd you do that? And they'll be like, well, I did this and I did that and I did that. And a lot of other musicians don't really act like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fact that we have a whole culture and part of the industry that's built on documenting what we do for others to learn it.
Yeah.
With the books and videos and all that we do and the clinics and everything, it's just a great thing, you know. And I you know, I've always loved it, and I've always loved being part of it. Even a lot of people who play a lot, we all aspire to have the best gigs we can have, and you know, like I work a lot in New York and on Broadway, and a lot of the musicians, like they kind of don't have a foot in this world, and they sometimes they want to, or they just or they're busy with their playing. But I've always made this a huge part of my life. Like I've always loved teaching. I've always loved going to clinics. I've always loved drum books since I was a kid, since I was reading, drum techniques of Rush under the covers when it was too late to practice at 13, and like, wow, notation. It would be cool to do this someday,
Yeah.
So I've always had a, fascination with that side of it,
I got a question for you, Joe, and what you're talking about, the community, and obviously you are a huge and fantastic spokesperson for the community because of, Broadway, Wisdom Media, Hudson Music, all the stuff that you do. I do have a question about Broadway and what you had said about, coming together as a community. It seems like the music business, I remember when I was younger, getting into the music business, it seemed like this big, giant monster. It's like, how am I going to make this happen? And then once you start making it happen, it's exactly what you said. It's a smaller community. It's everybody knows each other. And for the most part, everybody's friendly and buddies and stuff like that. Now, it seems to me an even smaller slice of that pie would be Broadway and getting your foot into that door. How did that come to be? Was it an audition? Was it a word of mouth thing? How did you do that? I'm so intrigued by that.
That's a great question. So first of all, let me say that it is a great community of players here in New York on Broadway. And sadly right now, everybody's really, struggling and suffering with this shutdown. And I just can't wait for that part of it to be over. I mean, we'll come back to that, but yeah, it's a community, and you have to earn your way in, just like the LA section scene is or was. The Nashville scene, I know from, being the interviewer of, some of the Nashville guys like Rich Redmond and Jim Riley talking about sleeping on couches. You have to earn your way in, and frankly, for me, I have to be honest, I never really aspired to it that much when I was younger, because part of it was I didn't think I was qualified. I had played some school musicals in high school, and there was a lot of mallet percussion, and some of those older shows, you played a little drum set, but there was other things going on. So for instance, my good buddy, Larry Lelly, he can do all of it. So he was playing How to Succeed in Business, and it had, maybe some things I might not be comfortable with. I think it was a swing book, but he might have had mallets in there or something. But now, of course, as you know, there's shows are like rock shows and pop shows where the drum set is the focus. Lion King, Hamilton, Rock of Ages, Jersey Boys. So the way it happened for me was, like I think many careers happen, is I just practiced, worked as hard as I could, and it was just a case of preparation meeting opportunity. And the way it worked out for me was the first show I played on Broadway was Moving Out, which was the Billy Joel show.
Yeah.
And the way I actually got into the show, and that show did audition the drummers. And if you guys are interested, and that's not how you usually get into subbing. Usually you break in by subbing. Right. Typically what happens is the way it normally works is like this. You're in New York, you get known in the area, and someone knows you're playing well enough to either invite you to sub, or even better yet, you play some gigs with another musician, guitar player, bass player, horn player, and they say to a drummer like Kevin Dow at Jersey Boys, hey, I played such and such gig with Joe B and he was really good. You should have him in as your sub. And when another musician says that about you, especially one of the people in the band that would have to play with you when you come, that's great. That's
word of mouth.
That speaks volume. Yeah.
It's word of mouth. And really, truly, like Liberty DeVito said a thing, I don't care if other drummers like how I play. They don't hire me. I care how the other people like how I play.
Yeah.
So having the other players recommend you is helpful. So what happened with me was I was working really hard with my original bands, playing in cover bands, and one of my bands had to get some legal advice for a proposed record deal, and I went to the music attorney, Ron Beanstock. And Ron's still a close friend. Actually, he's done some Saving Education Network things. I think I'm going to have him back on again to talk about some copyright things for drummers. But
cool.
Ron's a great bass player, and I took a local gig with him after being he has a lot of famous drummer clients, but he plays a lot, still very active. And I just took a gig playing some jazz standards with him one night, and I was talking to him. I'm like, great, I get to talk to Ron off the clock tonight,
Yeah.
and we spoke about different things. And I was saying how my prog rock band Forefront was starting to make some headway. And, Mike Portnoy was nice to me and he was your client. And Ron said, this was, my son had just been born. He said, you should, do some more stuff around here, maybe focus on some income producing gigs, maybe in New York. You should sub some Broadway shows. And I said, well, that's great, but I don't really know anybody on Broadway. I don't even know how I would begin. And it just so happens that the drummer for Moving Out was Chuck Berge. For those who don't know Chuck, he's one of those guys who has just a 40-year resume of, top. He was in Brand X after Phil Collins. He played with Rain.
What's his last name?
His name is Berge, Burgi. He's Billy Joel's current drummer.
Yeah.
And Chuck was playing Moving Out, and he needed a sub. And he was talking to Ron, and that week, and Ron said, I think Joe might be a good guy for you, maybe because I happened to be on the gig with Ron that night, and maybe he talked to Chuck the day before, happenstance. And then that was my way in. And on that show, you had to audition because there was no conductor. And the drummer was actually, I had my rhythm watch here. That's where I learned that. The drummer had to actually watch the click and make sure the songs were at the exact same speed every night. And the nature of that show was the band was visible above the stage and there was dancers below. And they wanted it to look like a rock show, so they didn't have a traditional conductor. So hence, because the drummer could crash and burn the show, they auditioned the drummer and made you rehearse with the click. And so I went through the audition process, and then I got the gig. Then from there, I got recommended to do Jersey Boys, and then I had to contend with, I haven't followed a conductor since high school. Got to relearn all that. And then that just becomes word of mouth, and you have to, you don't get do-overs really on Broadway. The great conductor Alex Lacamoire had said, when someone comes into my pit for the first time, they have to nail it the first time in. And if they don't nail it the first time in, the way they play has to make abundantly clear to me that they will nail it the second time.
Right.
And so when I first played Jersey Boys, for instance, I showed up to do my first show, and Kevin Dow, San Diego-based wonderful friend of mine who I subbed for 10 years at that show, Kevin was there. And I was like, hey man, what do you, and he's like, well, I'm here, just in case, they asked me to be here. So you'll go on. And if act one goes well, then I'll go home. And I'm like,
Wow.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah.
I was like, can I just go home? Because I want to go home. Yeah. Anyway, and then from there, you just build up, the nature of it is you try to do a good job. And then if you do a good job, you get to know more people. And so I've been lucky enough to be welcomed into the community, and so many great drummers there. It's just,
I bet.
Joe, do they have a opening date? Oh, sorry, Jeremy.
Oh, that's right. I was just going to ask another Broadway question. I had the great fortune of being able to shadow my friend John Mader in the Hamilton Pit in San Francisco. And I got to read the book behind him and marvel at his pinpoint accuracy, reading everything note for note, just nailing it 100%. And I asked him afterwards, and this is a question I want to ask you, you've got to you're playing 8 shows a week when you're on these gigs, right? Something like that. And you're doing no other gigs, and you're just deep in the book every night, playing the same exact set every night. Oftentimes you're not even seen, like he was in a separate room entirely from the pit. So, I mean, is that something that you enjoy? Do you feel like you get it, the more you play it, the more deep you get inside the music and really understand it and, dial in the feel and just the fills just so? Or do you feel like, oh man, by the 100th show, you're just dying, like, please let me play some different kind of gig?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So I've subbed mainly. So I subbed for like 15 years, and then I finally got a show. It was called Getting the Band Back Together, from my good friend Sonny Palladino, musical director of Doo-Wop Project. He was the MD of the show, and he brought me in. It was a rock show, and it tanked. Sometimes you sub for 15 years, and you get a show. But I got to design the book. I got to use my own kit, and I wrote all the drum parts. And we didn't run for very long, but adding together the rehearsals, I played the music for a year. And I found that since it was my voice, I was given the freedom to make things up.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed it. And when you play the show, even as a sub, certain shows and certain situations, you learn where you can take liberties and make it a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for me, I don't know how it is for other people, but when you're subbing, like, you don't get to that place, Jeremy, that you were saying.
Right.
Like you need to, like, once somebody said, when you're subbing, your brand's on the line every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with subbing, like, I would definitely get relaxed, but not at the level of when I was my own chair.
Mm-hmm.
But on my own chair, or even a show like Lion King or a show like In the Heights, Tommy and Andres played. They would play enough things differently. Like, I recorded Tommy and Andres playing their Tommy Igo at Lion King, Andres Ferrero at In the Heights. I recorded them probably 5 times each. And they were playing pretty differently. Like, Tommy had the grooves, but like, he would play a lot of things differently. Andres would play like, I mean, he sounds like El Negro playing in there. I'm like, this is amazing. Yeah. So there you could definitely do some different things. And then when I would at Jersey Boys, Kevin Dowd or Rock of Ages, John Weber, both great players. I went to watch them, and I noticed they were playing the book the same way every time. All the same fills. Well, what does that tell you? Play those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One way to get canned is to be like, oh, you know what? But like, those fills are lame. I'm going to play all my hip stuff here because I'm better than them. Like, which number one, I would never. Those guys are amazing. I was happy to play their parts, but so in my show, there was certain places where you kind of had to play what was there. The dancers were keying off it, or, and that was part of the fun of designing the book. I would work with the choreographer on like a dance break that was a drum solo, and he was like, Joe, that thing you do with the 2 feet, that little do yeah, well, double bass drum, yeah. I never got to where I was bored. I definitely, some shows had the parts were really tailored to the show. Like, I subbed for Joey Casada on a show called Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, I think it was. And Josh Groban was in the show. And the drum book was really peculiar. Like, there was a lot of it, you didn't even play any cymbals. You just played kick and snare because they programmed some of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So and then, so yeah, I never really got every show always had something that was a challenge, and either it was a technical challenge or a feel challenge or a cue challenge. So I never really was ever bored. Or
when you're subbing, you've only, I mean, how long are you subbing for? It could be one night, could be a week or a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's all of the above. So like, sometimes a player like Chuck Berge would be like, hey, can you take every Saturday matinee this month? I mean, that's the best. And then other times, like, if someone's not feeling well, you get called at, you get called at 4:00 to come in for an 8:00 show.
But and that's with a book that you don't even necessarily know yet.
No. That not like that. Nobody sight reads those books anymore. Yeah. You just can't. It's like, they're way too, like, you're playing to a click. Everything's detailed. Right. Everything's, like,
you do a ton of prep work for sometimes just a very short run of work.
Well, so Broadway, they're almost always open-ended. So in my case, I would want to learn a book if it was open-ended. I subbed for Andres on a limited run show though once. That's cool too. If you like it, it's, look, I spent a few years in a Rush tribute band, so I don't mind. Like, that was actually great training for subbing on Broadway. Like, you ideally you should become the other person.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Do you said you're playing to the click, and you also mentioned that, like, you're watching your rhythm watch. Are you hearing the click? Because I play to a click live, and I love it. I because the songs are the same every night. Is that what you do? Do you hear, or are you just watching the tempos?
So the design, that is designed by the musical directors when they design the show. And so most shows now, the conductor controls the click, and most of the pop shows, like Hamilton, the whole show is on click.
Right.
Jersey Boys, whole show on click. My show, the whole show is on click. Lion King had it for some songs, but a lot of it not. Same thing with In the Heights had it for some that didn't. And then some shows, I subbed for Larry at $1 Million Quartet, which was the show that had Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins.
Yeah.
And in that one, Larry was like, you were an actor, like it was supposed to take place in Sun Studios. So you were in costume on stage and you had to actually just memorize and know the show. And there was actually lines,
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, we had 2 lines, I used to come home and say to my wife, like, I'm acting on Broadway. She's like, shut up.
Love it.
But yeah, so the click would be deployed by the conductor.
Right.
And started, and so typically when you learn a show now, so much is riding on the drummer in these pop and rock oriented shows. Mm-hmm. You get a video of the conductor and you get a monitor recording of the drummer, so that when you go in, you're hearing what you practice to, and you know where the click is going to come in. There's times where it's like and in, and the click comes in on the downbeat. Alex does that at Hamilton. Right. I didn't play Hamilton that many times, but it's really, really super designed. Like. Yep. He didn't want to control the click. So actually in Hamilton, Alex gives it, or he's not there anymore, but the conductor gives the downbeat and the click is started by the percussionist and you come in together. Yeah. So you hear the click and you certainly have to be locked with it. Like ideally, like nobody wants to, when you go in the first time, you're nervous. It's difficult to make it feel, they'll there's a certain amount of patience for that, but ultimately you have to lock it in and make it feel like you and the click are just one thing. You can't be pushing and pulling all over it,
Right. Hey, Joe, do you get much rehearsal with that? Oh, sorry, Chip.
No, I was just going to say, out of all the shows, your career in Broadway, did any stand? What was the most challenging situation and why? Would you say?
That's a good question. I mean, They all had heart attack moments for me. Subbing for Tommy Igoe was a big challenge for me, and and Tommy conducted the show too.
Wow!
And, you King where the wildebeest. So you had to play on a floor tom. I forget the exact name. The little floor tom thing, and in Lion King you had to turn the snares on and off a lot, and I'd forget, like I would miss that in the book, and I'd come to a tune with a backbeat, and it would be bonk, no snare. I finally realized, like for the Stampede, I could leave the snares on because he had an off and on, but you were never playing the drum. And so I remember doing the show, and Tommy was conducting, and I had been doing it that way for 6 months because I can remember to have the snares on during Hakuna Matata now if I leave it on. So Tommy's on conducting, and I'm in the room alone. And he's conducting the show. The Stampede comes and playing it, and he's conducting, and he's like, you heard the buzz, like, I'm like, so that was hard, and so Lion King's technically very hard. Hamilton is technically really hard. I mean, Hamilton is 3 hours of nonstop concentration. That technically In the Heights was probably the hardest book. A lot of musicians, let me just put it to you this way. One of the shows when I first played, it was with Alex Lacamoire. He came down after the first act and I always, as I subbed more shows, your first show in, you're really nervous because like if this doesn't go well, they're going to give me the boot. Now, that never happened to me, but I was always really nervous going in. And so, you'll go in and sometimes depending on how comfortable you are, they'll start the click and you'll be like, no, it cannot be that slow, and you're, so yeah, those shows were hard. Jersey Boys, the challenge was you had to play super soft all the time. And, so there was nothing technically hard, but the fact that the volume had to be so controlled, challenge. So there'd be times where I'd be playing that show in the afternoon and then Rock of Ages at night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You really had to pay attention to
two different worlds.
Yeah. But yeah, those, and, I subbed at Pippin for, Jared Schoenig. He's a great drummer. And then I subbed at 2 shows for Clint again and Jesus Christ Superstar and Beautiful. And, both of those guys. Anytime you're sitting in someone, Larry Lely, Gary Seligson at School of Rock, you're sitting in someone's chair who's like a world class player. It's always like kind of hard, you know.
Yeah.
But they always. I was always just had nothing but admiration for the guys. Like Clint's drum book is like just so, you know, he was in stuff after Gadd. The guy's a great, like, to play his parts, like an honor, you know. So yeah.
That's so cool.
So
Hey, we got a question here on Facebook from Jim Royal. He wants to know, how does a young
Jim.
drummer break into Broadway? That's his question.
So yeah, that's I get asked that a ton, and you know, you just have to be in the scene, playing gigs in the area, and get musicians to know you until you get someone to recommend you. I mean, there's really no other way to do it. Eventually you'll probably meet somebody who's doing it, and maybe they can recommend you. And it's okay to inquire and ask. Sometimes what happens is you can go audit the book. You can go sit in the pit with the drummer. But you like somebody who has has a big long running show, they're probably going to get a lot of people to be asking to come and do that. So if no one knows you're playing in town yet, you can't really expect to call, you know, Carter McLean and go, you know, sit in the pit at the Lion King and have him let you do the show. People need to know you a little bit. So yeah, just, you know, play as much as you can, gently inquire if you can audit a book, and try to get to know the players, and then eventually, hopefully you'll get a shot. There's, you know, it's like any other playing thing. There's no guarantee, but that's how you do it.
One of the things I did when I had that rare opportunity to shadow my friend in the Hamilton pit was in the interest of, I didn't know he would have a separate book for me to follow. I just thought I was going to be watching him play. So I actually transcribed the first act on my own. So I brought in my transcription. He's like, "Oh, dude, you don't need that. Here's the book you can watch." I was like, "Oh, that's great." But I thought, hey, you know, he'll know that I know the book because I've written it out, right? So who knows? If he never needs a sub, maybe he'll think of me because he'll remember that. Didn't work out, but
also let me say this. Check this out. So when Clint needed a sub for Jesus Christ Superstar, which was one of my favorite gigs. That revival didn't last long, but you know, that's what put Simon Phillips on the map in the West End.
Right.
It was so I had played Rock of Ages, or I had played a couple shows with a couple people in the band, and Clint needed somebody on short notice to learn during previews, right? And so he kept hearing from a couple of the people in the band, get Joe B, whatever. He didn't know me, so he called Tommy, who I was subbing for at the time. He's like, "They're telling me you get this guy Bergamini. I don't know him. Should I get him?" And so Tommy was like, "Yeah, he'd be great. Get him." So, you know, it's all like one success begets another success.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of what I said at the beginning. You know, it's everybody thinks the music business is this big monster to get into, but it's really not. Once you're in there, everybody knows one another, you know. Yeah.
So Joe, do you get an opportunity to get any rehearsal in on these shows?
Typically, if you're subbing, there's none whatsoever. You go. That's why they have to trust you, like, and know you're playing. You go watch the book until you feel that you're ready, and then when the person is ready to put you in, they put you in. And there's a whole protocol for that, by the way. Like, the rhythm section has designated, like, usually it's like the main keyboard player, the bass player, sometimes the guitar player, and the percussionist. All the regular players have to be there for a first-time drummer's performance.
That makes
sense.
sense.
Because if the drummer starts going off the rails, they gotta, like, "Dude, over here, come down."
Well, Joe, we know you were a dedicated teacher while you were doing all of the Broadway. So this is a great thing now with COVID that you have that going on. And I know you have a lot of students and a lot of online students and some celebrity students with Mark Giuliana. So do you prefer teaching or gigging, or do you just love it all?
I love teaching. I think all of us, you know, I mean, I wouldn't be doing it for this long and for as much as I do if I didn't love it. I really find it to be super rewarding. And I love playing, you know, I mean, I truly love them both. And one of the great things about being in the New York area is you can go and do a Broadway show and play this, you know, something that everyone knows, you know. and then come home and I can teach the next day, and it gives you a little bit of fun notoriety without, there's not like face recognition, but I mean, I could remember being down at the Jersey Shore with Rob Wallace from Hudson, and be like, oh, "This is my friend Joe. I told you about him. He's the editor for," and the guys down the shore are like, "You're the guy who played Jersey Boys, right?"
That's cool.
So I'm glad you brought up Rob, because I want to shift the conversation, if we could, to talk about some of the other things you're involved in, because you got so many irons in the fire in the drumming world. Hudson Music. You guys took a risk on me when I brought you my manuscript, and you published it, which was like, oh my God, I'm Joe Bergamini thinks my book is cool. Thank you. But you've been involved, you've had your hands in, like, I don't know, dozens of different books and DVD projects. And you're a senior editor at Hudson. You yourself have written a whole bunch of different drum books. How did that whole partnership with Rob get started, and how did your role evolve?
So it was a natural progression. Oftentimes when I've heard many people speak about setting goals and career goals and things like that. And certainly I've had them. But senior editor for Hudson Music, or, director of Saving Education Network, I didn't even know these jobs existed. How can I have a goal for something I doesn't know exists? So it happened in a very organic way where as I mentioned before, I was always interested in books. I've always enjoyed reading and drum books, and especially got fascinated with reading along with transcriptions, like seeing the architecture of a part that I liked on paper. And so my earliest foray was I submitted some articles to Modern Drummer magazine, and I live in New Jersey. They're based here, so that was when Bill Miller was the editor and Ron Spagnardi was still alive. And I would go to the festival, and eventually I met them, and I nicely asked, can I submit something, put my face with the name, and they published a few of my transcriptions. And then soon I got to do the rock charts column, and I was doing a transcription every month. At the same time, I was studying with Dom, and I went to school to be an architect, by the way. Architecture degree is what I went to school for. I thought either, I didn't know anyone in the music business as a kid, so I thought either you were a rock star or you had a regular job. I didn't know about teaching drum books, all that. So Dom kind of, picked me out as having design chops, and I worked on It's Your Move, his book, with him at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And so that book came out, and Dom started introducing me to people in the publishing industry at NAMM while I was writing articles for Modern Drummer. That led to me doing a couple books for the old Warner Brothers. And the best known one I did for them was my friend Ray Bryce was the guy doing the drum books at that time. The best known one I did for them was Drum Techniques of Led Zeppelin. I redid that book, and I still get students from that book. Like, people buy it and they Google my name, and they're like, "This guy teaches. I'm gonna contact him." So then I did those books for Warner Brothers, and then I became, just again, going to the trade shows and networking. One of my old friends from the music scene in New Jersey became a vice president at Carl Fisher Publications. And he's like, we got to do something together. And I was kind of freelancing all these projects. And he said, we need a new drum editor. Why don't you come in and talk to the CEO about becoming the drum editor? And I was like, sure, that'd be great, man. I'll come in. And I set up the appointment. And the night before, I was like, by the way, what does a drum editor do? And so I went in, I got the gig, and they were like, here's a budget of however many $1,000. This is an artist. We want you to make a hand drumming DVD with her. And I had to bring that project in, and then I had to sign some people for drum books and things. And I was working on my own projects at the same time, but I did that gig for a couple of years, and I got Scott Rockenfield from Queensrÿche. We did a book, and Jason Bittner and I did a book. And, I just felt like they were getting out of the drum thing. And I knew Rob Wallace and Paul Siegel from Hudson Music, and I really wanted to make a move from Fisher. And Jason Bittner and I had become friends. We were still buddies. Great guy. And he had signed with Hudson to do his DVD. And he's like, sorry, man. I mean, I know you're with Fisher, but Hudson's the big. And I was like, I don't blame you. I would have done the same thing. So he was doing a clinic at Drummers Collective in New York, and I went down to hang, and I saw Rob and Paul there in the corner, and they were like legends to me. I mean, I had all the Steve Gadd video up close, Simon Phillips, Dennis Chambers, Omar Hakim, Dave Weck, all that stuff. And I just went up to them and I said, currently the drum editor for Carl Fisher. I've done a few books. I'd like to maybe make a move. I can't imagine you guys need me. You're the best in the business, but I kind of, books is my thing. And I don't know. And they turned to me and said, we're thinking of growing the business. Why don't you send us a resume? So I went home, made a resume. And I sent it to them, and we talked, and they brought me on. And then they just trial by fire. Next thing I know, I was meeting with Aaron Spears and Keith Carlock in New York City, and DVDs, and going to the NAMM show and learning how to do all the stuff. And it just grew in the all this stuff, like the consulting stuff and publishing and layout and all that. I learned it all as I went along, and just that's all.
I got a question for you. That's fascinating. I know you studied with Dom you said in your 20s, and
for 6 years, from when I was 19 to 25. Yeah.
And you guys have a working relationship now, right? With how did it go from student to working relationship? Because that's awesome. That's so cool. I don't know him nearly as good as you do at all, and he is such a sweetheart of a guy. I love Dom.
Oh man,
and that's just so cool.
He's a single-handed. Like I helped him write his bio one year, and I was like, he's been traveling around the globe preaching the gospel of drumming for 40 years.
Yeah.
He's like family to me at this point. I can't imagine. He was my mentor, and always. I've done plenty on my own, but we always enjoyed working with each other in each other's company, and we complement each other. So when Dom wanted to do a series of drum books, it really it dovetails very easily with Hudson, because we're not really competing for artists. Like Dom has a lot of ideas for books, and we can bring on. Wisdom isn't going to bring on Dave Weckl to write a book. That's Hudson Music kind of size project. So as time went on, we just realized we could work nicely together. I'm more of an organizer, and he's a big idea guy. And we're like a boutique publisher, and we got distributed by Alfred. And we just put out a few books each year, and we work together. And, Dom is also a consultant for Sabian, so we get to work together on SE. And so it's pretty awesome, but we're like family. I mean, we've been at, weddings of each other's family, and sad to say funerals at this point. But I couldn't imagine life without him.
That's great, man. That's so cool.
Joe,
global ambassador to drumming.
I got a question, Joe. You got this book, Neil Peart, Taking Center Stage with Hudson. How did that come about? And can you tell us that story? Like, what was that like? Were you intimidated? How did that happen?
So I've been asked about this a lot, and but the short version is I had the Hudson Music position with Rob, and was getting to work with all these great drummers. And I never brought up Neil. I knew they were friends with Neil. Neil's the reason I play drums. I heard Subdivisions on the radio at 13. I'm sorry if you know me and you've heard the story 8,000 times, but I played along with Rush for like 3 hours a day, every day for the first 4 or 5 years I played. I was in a Rush tribute band for 10 years. He was my favorite drum, the biggest influence on me easily. And I looked up to him, not just as a drummer, but his ethics, his writing, his lyrics, everything. So, I never mentioned his name at Hudson, because I was like, number one, me mentioning his name is going to have no bearing on whether he wants to do a project. And secondly, the last thing in the world Neil Peart probably wants is to hang around with fanboy like myself. So I never brought his name up. And then one day, after I had been in there a while, Rob said he had lunch with Neil, and Neil's talking about maybe being open to doing a project. So Rob said, "We know you're a huge fan of his. Why don't you write a proposal?" And I was like, "No way, this is for real." And so I did it. And then I was like, I didn't even know if I wanted to. I had long ago decided I would never meet him. I certainly, he never was part of our community that we talked about before. He's just not comfortable or wasn't comfortable around strangers. So he never came to any of the drum shows. And, we would gently try to see, hey, would you be interested in doing a PAS claim? He never wanted to do any of that. So I was like, I'm never going to have a chance to meet him, and that's fine. I mean, he'd probably think I was weird anyway, right? So anyway, I wrote the proposal, and he'd be right. So I wrote and then Neil expressed interest in it, and it just went back and forth with Rob as the go-between, and Paul at the time too, but mostly Rob, because they wouldn't. With some of these bigger artists, like, you don't have immediate access. You have to make sure they're comfortable. So finally it got to where Neil liked the proposal. And then Rob said, well, Joe's our editor and he wrote this proposal, so you should probably meet him. So then Rob said, how should we do it? And Neil said, bring him to the show. So we went to PNC Bank Arts Center, where I had seen them, Rush, and all my favorite bands a million times. And I got I often say if my 16-year-old self knew that would have happened, I would have had a heart attack and died. I met Neil backstage on this bus. He took me on stage. If the story ended with that, I would have died a happy man. Took me on stage, sat me behind his drums. It was nice and sweet as could be. And Rob clearly mentioned to me before we met him, he's like, don't talk about the project. Don't, this is just for him to get to meet you and stuff. So we hung out, and I sat behind him and watched him play Subdivisions at Soundcheck, and I was yeah, by the way, thank you again, Rob Wallace, for that. And then at the end of that day, he said, looking forward to working with you. And then we, we kind of hammered the thing down, and over the course of all the meetings, I got to know him pretty well. And then we did the DVD where I interview him on camera. And then I wanted to do this drum book, Taking Center Stage, which is, I transcribed all the performances on the website.
You recently updated that, right? That's available on your website?
Yeah, we updated the digital version. I actually had a pro drummer fan/friend email me a couple things he thought that I got wrong in the transcription. It was of Spirit Radio, and he was right. Like, I mean, I'm the first to admit when I make a mistake. So yeah, we fixed the digital version, but
right on.
But yeah, he pretty much, like, he wrote the foreword for that, but it's my transcriptions and my analysis, and then I reused past writings of his about the songs. But on the DVD, he subjected himself to my questions about the songs, which was amazing because he had never wanted to do that before. Yeah, and then so. It was, and Chip, you asked if I was intimidated. I was at definitely, I got comfortable around him eventually, but I certainly, he was one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he also, he had like a BS detector, like nobody else I ever met. Mm-hmm. So, if you were talking and you were starting to not make sense, it would be like the gaze, when he fixed me in his gaze, and I was like, what am I even talking about right now? Eventually we got the book came out great, and he couldn't have been better. And then when he lived in LA at the last 20 years of his life, and I got there a lot for gigs and NAMM shows and things, and I would be like, hey, you want to, should we meet for lunch? And he would almost always say yes. So I would fly out early for my gig or NAMM show or whatever, and I'd go meet him at his Bubba Cave, and we would have lunch. And I still could never really believe it. It was like,
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool, man.
Well, it's really great when your heroes turn out to be really good people,
I in the Hudson gig and just my travels, I've had the chance. Pretty much, I'm so lucky to have met all of my heroes who are still living. Almost all of them, not all of them, but just to rattle off a few of them: Simon Phillips, Steve Gadd, Neil Peart, Dave Weckl. Well, I never met Jeff, but Terry Bozzio. Just those guys are big influences on me. Will Calhoun and 201.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
They've all been 201. They've all been really great people. Mike Portnoy is another one. Like Mike used to come see my Rush tribute band, and you would sit in and so yeah, I can't really say I ever had a bad experience with that.
That's great.
That's our fantastic drummer culture right there. There's a testimonial to it too, because I don't know that you're going to hear guitarists saying, "Oh yeah, I'm buddies," and name off all the legends in guitar, and
Yeah.
that they're that tight and that willing to share ideas
Yeah.
and have that friendship. So it's
You know,
a beautiful testimonial to it.
I want to mention two other guys that I got to know through Hudson, who now I'm close with, Steve Smith and David Garibaldi. Both of those guys, like, they're so into their craft.
Yeah.
We work on the books, but we'll talk about other things, and like they'll text me like, practice this idea, and then if I practice and I respond, it's like we're engaging.
Mm-hmm.
It's a ridiculous honor, like, and it just reminds you, like when you see David Garibaldi and Steve Smith and these guys practicing and working on stuff when they have no gigs, it's like you can see why the greats are great. It's like, it's the work, man. It's the work. There's no, you do the work. There's no shortcut. There's no smoke and mirrors, man. It's like work.
Yeah. Yeah. I put a thing on Facebook about the Will Coxon book, and you'd mentioned, Steve Smith's doing that stuff. And I think I responded back because I was working on Paradiddle Johnny, and I was watching Steve Smith.
Here's the merit badge.
Yeah, well, that's why I started working on the book, because Jeremy has those merit badges, and I'm like, I want one, but I'm going to earn it. So, sew it on my jacket. But I was watching Steve Smith play those things, I'm like, gosh, and his independence is phenomenal. And it's exactly what you said, just the work ethic that it takes to get to that level. It doesn't matter where you're at there. He's still chipping away at the stone to get better. It's just amazing stuff. How did the SIN come to be, Sabian Education Network? How did that whole thing start for you? Are you the founder of that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
So, I've been endorsing Sabian since about 1995, so I've been playing the cymbals a long time. I actually never changed an endorsement. I got, the companies were kind of Sabian, Vic Firth, LP brought me on when I was pretty young, actually, and then I always wanted to play Tama. Ever since I saw Stuart Copeland, Billy Cobham, Neil Peart when I was a kid, everybody seemed to play Tama. I wanted to play Tama, and I actually passed on a couple other endorsements and just kind of hung in there. And that happened around 2000. And I will say, these companies that I play, I hope they never get rid of me, because it's really what I like the best, So, so Sabian, I always had a close relationship with everybody there. They're very family oriented.
Yeah.
Their values match my own. I love the cymbals. And over the years, really kind of knew everybody at the company. They like some of the other companies, they haven't been absorbed or anything. So there's been a little bit of more, you do this, you guys know, you do this long enough, your friends change companies and you don't know anybody at a company, but so I, along the way, some of my other friends were doing different things in the industry and would think of me for things. So for instance, I was offered a job as an editor for Modern Drummer one time, and I was just broke into playing Broadway, and I didn't want to sidetrack. I felt like I couldn't go to the office every day. I think I would be sidetracking what I just got in my playing side. So I passed on that. And there's a gentleman by the name of Rick Drum. I don't know if you guys know him.
Yeah.
Rick was the president of Remo, and then he was president and CEO of Vic Firth, and then he was CEO at D.E.C, and is now one of the best businessmen I've ever met. Was a corporate coach, and he does some different things. And he had offered me a couple of opportunities in the business, and he was kind of instrumental in advising me and recommending me to start SEN. Sabian was looking for, they always have been a company that supported education, and they wanted to create more of an actual division of their support that was for drums. So you guys know that Diodario had their own education thing, right?
Right.
And of course, back in the day, Vic Firth had the great big site, that they still have. Rick was actually instrumental in starting both of those things. Yeah. So he moved me to Sabian, and I've known them so long, and they saw I guess they knew my organizational, publishing stuff, and they said, we want to start this thing, and would you be interested in running it for us? And I was just blown away, honored. It wasn't even really like an interview. It was like, we need this. Would you do it for us? And I said, are you kidding? Of course, I'd love to. And that was just they gave me a chance to create like a community for drum teachers, which I love. You guys are doing that here too.
Yeah.
But I kind of, and maybe this is what you guys think of. I immediately thought of my first couple of PASIC shows, like hanging out with some people I knew, but new drummer friends, like, like here's Rick from Denver, here's, Jeremy from California and Chip from Arizona. Like, hey man, what's your favorite jazz drumming book? Are you using Art of Bop, or what do you,
Ron Spagniardi.
Say that again?
Independence by Rod Spagniardi.
There you go. Yep. Or even, what are you doing? Oh, my students have been canceling a lot because they're sick. What's your policy on cancellations?
Right.
Yeah.
What do you do for soundproofing in the room?
Yeah.
What do you do for advertising? What do you do for, preparing students for college when they ask you about colleges and loans? Everything. And that was what I imagined SEN to be. And so yeah, I run it and kind of, do interviews and do different things that we think will help drum teachers. And I ask Dom for advice, and I ask you guys who are my friends who I trust for advice, and try to make it so Sabian truly wants it to help drum teachers.
You've done an amazing job. I've got to say, I mean, Joe, ever since I've known you, it's like, it's always growing. It's always, it's always just, you always up the bar, and thank you. I appreciate it.
Well,
so how many hours a week do you work, man? You wear so many hats.
And you got a family
What's
too.
your work life schedule?
Yeah. So, I have other interests in life besides, before our New Jersey got covered with snow, I try to exercise and ride my bike a lot, and I enjoy the outdoors. Before this, the Doo-Wop Project is a bunch of the singers from Jersey Boys and musical director Sonny Palladino. I was the 3 years before the pandemic. I think I did 75 to 100 dates with them on the road. And sometimes running some of the SEN stuff and the publishing stuff is almost easier on the road, because like sometimes I'm teaching and I have a couple hours in the morning and then a break, like it gets broken up and it's frantic and I have emails to deal with. Like sometimes I'd wake up in a with and I'd have, with the Doo-Wop Project too, we would do sit down things like with the symphony for a week. You're in the same hotel. I never had any problem with productivity from the road with those things. But when I'm home now during the pandemic, I teach. I don't teach on the weekends. I have two kids. My son, you can hear him shedding his congas out there right now. He's 18 and he's in music school.
Sounds great.
My daughter's
cool.
16. She's in high school. She's a cheerleader. So I don't teach on the weekends. I spend time with them, and I like to the outdoors. So on the road, I would go to a lot of national parks, but here I hike and stuff. So I try to have that balance. I go through periods where the balance gets very work. Like right now, Hudson's really busy. I got some Sabian things to do, and I'm thankfully I've never been busier with teaching. Like I teach all online right now, and I feel like it's like you leave a 30-year trail of breadcrumbs, and like people come from some of them still say that Zeppelin book I did 30 years ago, some of them, but yeah, it does get like, sometimes I have to put more hours in on the work. And then, if I want to work on a project, like Hudson might have a project coming in that I want to actually do the transcribing myself. Mm-hmm. And if I decide to do that, which in this case I probably would, it's a pretty exciting project. I just will sleep less until I get that part of it done.
Hey, cool. Joe, can you tell everybody that what is your website and where can people get your stuff?
So my website's my name, joebergamini.com, and I sell my books there. But you can get them digitally on Hudson Music. Okay. And, of course, they're all all of our wisdom books are available physically through.
And I can get your Zeppelin book off your website.
Yeah. You can get them all on Amazon and stuff too. But yeah, they're all on my website. Hey, if you have Prime and you don't want to pay shipping, go for it. Go to Amazon, but you can get them on my website. And then the digital stuff is on Hudson. I'll tell you what, man, the digital. I have my my teaching book. That's just the books I go to on a daily basis, during lessons. So like, I feel myself going to the bookcase so much. Like, I'm just getting more into the Hudson thing, and I can. I don't have to keep getting up. I can just switch, between the books on the iPad.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
But yeah, joebergamini.com is all my, they're all there. And again, all the digital stuff is with Hudson, and then the wisdom books are physical with Alfred. So all the big, anywhere you get your music drum books, they should have them. But,
Right on, cool.
Well, we're going to give away one of your books today here, and so we're going to figure out how to do it. Yes, your new book, Arrival. Talk to us about what's the subject matter on that book?
How did that come about?
It's basically like a hard rock with progressive rock like leanings play along book. It's 10 tunes. I have a progressive rock band that's inactive right now. It's called Forefront, that I formed with Zach Risby. He and I met playing in a Rush cover band together. He's currently the guitar player in the band Kansas. And
cool.
So Zach wrote the songs on there for Dom.
Well, he doesn't suck.
No, he definitely. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's a play along there. I just would say too, like for all the Broadway playing that I've done and you guys asked me about, I've always tried to keep an original output happening. So we have 3 albums with Forefront. I played in a group called Happy the Man, which is kind of well-known progressive rock band. I did a record with them called The Muse Awakens. And I'm working on a record during the pandemic that I'm recording here, learning as I go with my guitar player friend, Vinny DeMasi. So you can find it. You can get the original stuff on my site, but it's also on iTunes and everything. But yeah, this is just a hard rock play-along book. It's really fun. It comes with no drums mixes without click and no drums mixes with click, and my performances of it, and you can use it for your recitals. And if you make YouTube videos with it, I promise I won't ding you. You can keep them up.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, we're going to give them away here. I guess what we're going to do is I'm just going to pick a couple lucky winners off of our Facebook page. How does that sound to you?
That sounds good.
Okay, we're going to give 2 of them away, and we'll figure out how to get the download code to Kevin Lehman. There's number 1.
Oh, that's not
Yay,
fair. The
Kevin.
fix is in.
What?
Fix is in.
My brother.
Kevin won again.
Kevin and
Okay,
Joe are
and then-
friends.
Kevin probably
Okay,
has it.
Okay, Kevin already has it. Now he's going to be mad at me. Okay, sorry, Kevin.
He went ahead last week.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Kevin, go away. Just I'm kidding. Don't go away, Kevin. I'm kidding. Okay, we're going to give it.
I thought there was some stuff in the ballot box going on over there.
Recount.
Okay, nobody can get mad at me for this. Jacob Sosa.
Yeah.
All right.
Jacob.
Okay,
Jacob.
Jacob won. And then so Jacob Sosa won. And then you know what? Nobody can be mad at somebody from Canada. So Neil LaFortune, you win one too. How's that?
All right.
Neil.
Neil's awesome, dude. Neil's
Guy.
sweetheart of a guy.
If you guys get me your email addresses somehow, the winners, I will get your code.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
Thank you,
All right.
Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. This has just been such an honor, man. This is fantastic. Picking your brain about Broadway. I've always wondered about that stuff, and living out here on the West Coast, it's something you don't, I never even thought of. And when I started reading your bio, I was like, oh, I got to ask. That's just fascinating.
Well, hopefully once we get to the other side of this pandemic, hopefully there'll be a renaissance with it. It's just such a special scene, a special place. Not everything, all of it. Miss going to concert,
right.
all that.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, it's thanks to people like you that keep it going, keep the fire going while during COVID. And it's really easy to get down and depressed about all the music that's not happening, but there's so much that is happening thanks to you and people like you. So thank you for
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you guys for having me, all of you. I really admire what you guys are doing. With the interviews I've been watching, either in person or from afar, and great to have you involved with SCN. Anybody who's watching is welcome to join it if you teach, and just happy to have you guys as friends and proud to be on your show.
Likewise.
Oh, man.
Joe, thank you for all you do for the drumming community, and we really appreciate all the listeners. We're hoping to offer you some insight, some inspiration, some motivation about drumming and life. And everybody out there has all of us available to you as a resource. So you can contact any of us anytime with any questions. And we are grateful for all of you. And we appreciate all of the positive feedback, and let us know what kind of shows you'd like to see in the future. And Bart, what do we have on schedule next week?
Next week, why am I drawing a blank? I've been working on it. Dave Northrup. Sorry. Yes, Dave, if you're watching, I apologize. Dave Northrup. Dave is an amazing drummer. He has played with, he just finished a tour of Boss Gag, so he's got Picaro chops. If you haven't seen it, oh, man. He sent me some videos. He has like a GoPro just off to his left, off of his hi-hat. And, man, he's grooving. He's played with Travis Tritt. He has played with the Oak Ridge Boys. He's out of Nashville, obviously. Did a tour recently with Rick Derringer. Guy, he can't play. He can play, man, and just a sweetheart of a guy. So we're going to have him on next week, and it's going to be really nice to have him on and talk to him and pick his brain. And I got a funny Travis Tritt, Sam Morrison band story I got to tell him when we see him next week, if he remembers. So it'll be fun.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thanks,
Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Joe, you are the best, Joe. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Stay warm, Joe. Stay warm.
It's cold in here.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.